Okay, so welcome to Vibe, everyone. We're in Vibe Book and Music Shop. We're in Mui Wo, we're on Lantau Island, and we're in Hong Kong. So we're going out live on Facebook, and this show will be published tomorrow on YouTube. So today's presentation comes from ex-colonial Chief Superintendent BJ Smith. So BJ has written a book. Just the one, is it, BJ?
One's been published, yes.
So just one book that's been published, and it's on sale today at Vibe, $480. I hope you're all going to buy it. So anyway, BJ is going to tell us a little bit about himself, a little bit about the book. Please keep your questions till afterwards, and then I'll come round with the microphone, and we'll just have a Q&A session with him. All right, so without further ado, BJ Smith, everyone.
Thank you, Gary, for the intro, and everyone that's tuning in. I'm going to ask myself the first question. This is completely unrehearsed. I don't really know what I'm going to talk about until I start talking. So my first question to myself is, why did I join the Hong Kong Police Force? I've been in Hong Kong now for over 40 years. I came out in 1983 to be an inspector in the then Royal Hong Kong Police Force. So let me just cover how that came around. I was studying civil engineering at London University. I don't know why I chose civil engineering. I learnt out pretty quickly that I didn't actually enjoy it. And it was called a modular degree, so you had 8 subjects. And they told us at the very beginning, to get into the second year of the 3-year degree, you only needed to pass 5 subjects. So I immediately thought, well, why should I do 8? I'll just do 5 subjects. And I literally dropped 3 of the hardest subjects and didn't go to any of the lectures, didn't do any of the work. And then I sat my exams at the end of that first year. And I remember one of the subjects was structures. And it's too much maths for me, so I didn't bother going to any of the lectures apart from the first couple. I remember the lecturer in the actual examinations looking at me, and he must have been thinking, who the hell is this guy? Because he'd never seen me before. And I literally just put my name down and handed in a blank sheet of paper, as I did for 3 of those subjects. And then, would you believe, I passed. Thank God I never became a civil engineer, but I passed into the second year, and then it just kind of got worse after that. And I was sat in a lecture on something, and the guy next to me had applied to join the Royal Hong Kong Police Force as an inspector. And he sort of shook his head and he went, nah, this is not for me. And I said, well, give me and I literally took the forms off him, had a quick scan through, and I started filling in the form application in the middle of this lecture. And then I posted it off. In those days, you posted things off. And then I got a reply saying that I'd been selected initially from the group of applicants on paper to go for an interview in Grafton Street in London for the post. And I started thinking, okay, that's taken a turn I wasn't really expecting. So I went along, because it's London anyway, for the interview, and there was about 30 people there, and I was chatting with some of them, and there was ex-police, ex-army, guys who can actually speak Chinese already. And I thought, well, there's no way I'm gonna be selected, but I'll go through the process anyway. And I had the interview. I went for a medical on Harley Street, and then in the afternoon, the secretary said to me, you'll be flying out to Hong Kong in a few months' time to start training as an inspector. And they only chose 4 people from that list of 30. So I don't know what I did in the interview. I have no idea. And so I hadn't told my parents. I hadn't told the university. I was living in Scotland at the time. My dad was in the Royal Air Force. He was at Kinloss. So I left university. I went up to Scotland. I went on the dole, and I wouldn't wish anything worse on anyone than being on the dole in Scotland in the middle of winter. I actually got offered, but the first job I got offered was as a gravedigger. I got a phone call and they said, well, good news, Mr. Smith, we've found you a job. Don't get your hopes up, because there's other people in line who are more qualified than you. And it's as a gravedigger. And of course I had to sound like, great, it's employment, even though I knew I was coming out to Hong Kong. And then I got a phone call a few days later saying, very sorry, saying that they'd chosen the other guy that had the experience. So,
Stuart, isn't it?
so I flew out. And I flew out from Aberdeen in Scotland, funnily enough, and I went to Aberdeen in Hong Kong. Police College is at Aberdeen. And I did 9 months of training at Police College, and then I passed out as an inspector, and then I went on the streets in Ho Man Tin, my first posting, in uniform, grappling with the fact that my Cantonese was, you do 8 weeks of training in Cantonese, the first 8 weeks, elementary Cantonese, and that's all you get. And then you're out on the streets and the radio is all in Chinese. A lot of people you meet obviously don't speak English, especially in those days. Most of the police constables didn't speak any English. So you really had to learn quickly, sink or swim sort of stuff. And then you start to pick it up and you get into the rhythm of it all. And I did a spell in plain clothes. I was in the prostitution squad, then I was in the gambling squad. And then you just go through your career. And I'd heard early on about a unit called the Special Duties Unit. They're known as the Flying Tigers locally. And it really sort of attracted me to it because it was notoriously difficult to get into, a very tough selection. They were trained by the SAS and the SBS, and I really started looking into it, and I thought, I'm gonna try for this selection. So I did in 1986, 3 years after I arrived, I put myself forward, and I did this horrendous 2-week selection. In fact, my best friend at the time died on the second day. I mean, that's how tough it was. There was about 70 police constables, about 17 or 18 inspectors, and we ended up with 3 inspectors and about 20 police constables, and there was only one position open, and they chose me for that position, and 12 PCs. And at the end of my 6 months of training, there was 8 PCs and me. So I joined the unit. And next 12 years, I was in this special duties unit. We did a lot of cases in those days. If you remember the early 90s, a lot of armed robberies in Hong Kong. So although we were a counter-terrorist unit, we were also a highly trained SWAT team, if you like. We had the equipment and the knowledge. So I did a lot of criminal cases against firearms, over 80 cases through my 12 years with the unit. I ended up in charge of the unit. And then I came out, went back into mainstream policing, and I did a lot of operational police work, I guess. Then I retired about 9 years ago, and I ended up getting into private security, which I do now. I don't do it full time. I don't go into an office. I don't, it's not 9 to 5 for me. I do projects, normally executive protection, which is a posh name for bodyguarding, I suppose. So I've got certain clients I take care of when they're in Asia. And I do other bits and pieces, but it's basically just almost like a hobby. So I started getting into writing. I'd always loved reading as a kid, right through. I've always had a book or 2 books on the go. And I enjoy writing, and so I started writing short stories. I was a big Roald Dahl fan, Tales of the Unexpected sort of stuff. So I started writing short stories because I think I'm sort of innately lazy, and a short story is a much quicker, easier thing to do than a full novel. So that appealed to me, and I wrote a number of short stories, only just for my own benefit, or I'd send them out to mates and they'd make comments, and I was kind of putting off writing the novel. And I had 2 ways to go. I could either write an autobiography about my experiences in the Hong Kong police force, which were numerous, or I could write a completely fictional work, some invented character, and go that way. And in the end, I thought, why not combine both? Why not write a fictional novel, but it's based upon my real experiences in the police force? So that's what I did, and that's what Gone is all about. Basically, it's kind of me as the main character, and some of the stuff in this book is actually what really happened, word for word. Some of it is a blend of fiction with what really happened, and some of it's totally invented, the figment of my own imagination. So it's a combination of all of that. And I'm not going to tell you which bits are real and which bits aren't, because I think half the fun of reading it is working out, I wonder if he really did that, or that sort of mystery around whether it actually really happened or not. So that's what I wrote the book, and I actually self-published to start with on Kindle, which you can do. Anyone can publish your own book on Kindle. And it just didn't feel right. I had no idea how the book was doing, but I just felt kind of almost like it was fake. You know, I did this myself. And then luckily, a real publisher called Graham Earnshaw read the book, and he liked it, and he said to me, I can't publish this because it's already out there, but if you write a sequel to it with the same characters, just change the plot and the arc of the story, then I could maybe publish that. So I wrote a sequel to it, and I sent it to him, and he said, I've had a change of mind. I'm going to publish, the book was called Missing then, by Theo Timber, which is the name of my 2 dogs. So it was a pseudonym. He said, change the name of the book, use your own real name, I don't want a pseudonym, and also the ending, I'd like you to change the ending. We had a long conversation about how I would do that, and we agreed upon a different ending. So I rewrote that part, and I called it Gone, and I put my real name on it, and he published it, and there it is. And now he's got the sequel. It hasn't been published yet. It's with me at the moment. He's told me he liked it. It's a very solid follow-up. He doesn't want to change anything, so it'll go through this long period of editing and re-editing, etc., etc. And fingers crossed, it may well be out in the near future. The book launch for Gone, I suppose I better plug it really. It's coming up on Wednesday from 6:30 to 7:30 in the Bookazine in the Daegu, the old Central Police Station. And I'll be probably giving a similar talk to this and available, whatever, for questions and stuff. So that's a potted history of me and the book. And so if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Okay, so thanks, BJ. All right, so yeah, we'll start with some questions. So, Peter, I'll hold the mic.
Hi BJ, how are you? Just want to know, why did you use a pseudonym for initially when you first started writing?
That was purely on the publisher's advice. He said that if you use a pseudonym, people might think that you've used AI to write the book. So obviously I have know nothing about this world, and I just took him on face value, and I changed it to my real name. So that was just what I was advised to do. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Yep. I'll hold the mic.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the introduction of the book. The question, I've got a number of questions, but I'll just ask one for the moment. When I came to Hong Kong in 1989, I did a bit of background research on Hong Kong to understand where I was coming. And somebody introduced me to a Brit who had been a policeman in the 1970s and 80s, I guess. And he was giving me some pretty rough ideas about the corruption in those days that was taking place in Hong Kong. And he was meant to be helping to clear it up. How did that impact upon you? And how did you find yourself in difficult situations as a result of that?
No, I was, I guess, lucky or unlucky, depends how you look at it. But when I joined, that had largely been cleaned up. The ICAC had been formed up. The syndicated corruption, which is what you're referring to, and it was rife. It was just, that was just how the police force operated. You know, you took money, and that's how it was done. So that had all been finished. There was probably still some people that were taking money for looking the other way. I mean, there probably is now. I mean, any police force, that's going to be a feature, right? But it was on a much reduced scale, and I was never aware of it. I was never personally offered money, or it just didn't happen to me. So I think it was definitely a feature, as you said. But when I joined, it largely gone.
Okay.
Gary?
Yeah.
While I realise you've retired, there's been a lot of talk recently about ICAC being, how can I say, knackered, basically, in that, they don't have the power they had, and there is a lot of corruption within ICAC. How do you perceive that?
Wow. To be honest with you, that's the first time I've heard that. I do have a good friend in the ICAC who was an ex-police officer. I haven't heard about there being internal corruption in the ICAC. So that's about as much as I can answer on that.
Okay.
That's the first time I've heard it is when you asked the question.
Do you feel it lost a lot of power?
The ICAC, I'm not really qualified to talk about the powers they have. I don't think they've lost any powers in terms of the legislation and the powers that they're granted under the legal structure. Whether they've lost power through politics, I honestly don't know.
Okay.
It would be wrong of me to put forward an opinion on something I'm not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so we'll move on. Any other questions from?
BJ, can I actually talk about the process of writing? How difficult was it to get started? How difficult was it to bring your real experience into something fictional? And how long did it take you to get your first draft of that novel?
So I can only talk from my own personal experience. I did do a bit of reading about writing a book, and from what I gathered, there's two styles of writing. One is the architect, and this is the style that the publishers prefer. So you sit down and you have the whole plot mapped out in your head from the beginning to the end. You have the characters all mapped out, you have the arc of the story, maybe a few red herrings here and there, and how it ends. And then you break it down into chapters. So chapter 1, you introduce blah, blah, blah. Chapter 4, you go on to the plot. And it's right through, all sort of mapped out, and then you start to write. So on any given day, you go, right, I'm on chapter 4, what do I need to cover? Oh, I need to cover these points. So the process, I guess, becomes easier. That just didn't suit my style. It seemed to be a little bit prescriptive and maybe restrictive. I don't know. I just didn't like it. So what I did, and again, this is purely me, I started to write before I even had a plot to the book. I knew that my protagonist was going to be a private investigator in Hong Kong. So I started the book, him waking up in the morning, living in a village in Lam Tsuen where I used to live, and getting to work in Central, and then the team coming in for the first briefing, before I'd even knew where I was going to take this. And then it started to evolve. And it's almost as if the book starts to write itself, and the characters tell you where to take it. For me, anyway, it's more sort of organic like that. And then obviously you have to have a better idea, and then the plot started to come in, then I started to fill in the blanks, and then you just go over it and over it and over it and move things around. And the second book, I thought, right, I should probably try this architectural style. And the other style is called The Gardener, by the way. And I still just wasn't interested in setting it all out. So I started, again, I did my own thing. I started writing it before I really knew where it was going. So it's very personal. It's obviously down to the individual. The publishers like something because they like to see the map out of the book, and they can look at it and they can maybe even advise in the early stages. But it's just something that I didn't take to.
Just to follow up, how far through the first book were you before you knew how it ended?
I had a rough idea about what the book was going to be about, which is a girl that goes missing. Just the detail of how and what and where I didn't really have, and literally it was sort of coming chapter by chapter. And I think, oh, hang on, so they could actually be linked into this. And it just grew, and it almost, as you writing the chapter, you'd think about the next one, and something would come into your head, and you would, it's very weird to do it that way, I know, but that's just how it worked for me.
And I don't want to hog the microphone, but one other thing. You've obviously got some slightly recognisable characters in your book that, from your experience, do they like it?
So normally people put in pseudonyms for the people that are in the book that they know. And I thought, you know what, people can say to someone, oh, I'm in that book, I'm this character, and people probably wouldn't believe it, right? But so my people are actually their real names, or their nicknames. Not their full names, just their first name or their nickname, and that's how they appear in my book. So they can actually say, oh, I'm this guy, and it's me, because that's my name, right? So I put them in there. And I cleared it with them all first. Do you object to me using your name? And every one of them came out and said, no, it's no problem at all. But yeah, it's a point. You can't just put someone in there with their real name and then have them doing something terrible in the book, because unless you've cleared it with them first. And the one time, there's a few things where I'm not quite so kind about the person in the book. and I have given them a pseudonym. Well, it's a fairly obvious one, but if you are that person. But yeah, I cleared it mainly.
What's happened to your short stories?
I've still got them, and I would love to publish a book of short stories. And I even said to my publisher, and he went, "There's no market for it. People don't read short stories anymore," which I think is a real shame.
Yeah.
And I was a real fan of that, the twist in the tale, the unexpected ending, yeah. And then it all, literally the last paragraph, you go, never saw that coming. So a lot of my short stories were based on that. I don't know, maybe things will change and it will become popular again. We'll see.
Okay, so yeah, I've got a question. You've obviously gone down the fiction route, but sort of factual fiction in a way. Do you ever see a time where you would maybe write other books based on stories? I mean, what I find, very, very interesting is the colonial days of the police force here and all those things that happened. And there's 1,000 stories out there that are kind of going to die if they're not resurrected, and there must be some real crackers out there. Do you ever see that you're going to write something non-fiction orientated?
The first cop I knew that wrote a book about his policing experiences was a guy called Chris Emmett, Hong Kong policeman, and that was published by Graham as well.
Yes.
And it did really well, probably because it was the first one. And Graham said to Chris, "Can you write another book?" And he said, "Well, no, because that's my autobiography, and really there can't be a part two." So what Chris did, he knew a lot of ex-Hong Kong police who had their own stories to tell. So he gathered a bunch of guys together and said, "Look, here's a chapter. Can you talk about this or that, which I know that you were involved in?" Which is a very clever thing to do, actually. And he contacted me and he asked if I could contribute to some of the I actually wrote 3 chapters for him in the end, and they cut 1 because of the book. So that was non-fiction, if you like, and it was my personal experiences. So that went into this other book, which is available out there. And that's how I got to know the publisher, which is how this all came around. So whether I would go back and actually write an autobiographical, I'm not sure. What I might do is just go off in a totally different direction with the fiction. Because with fiction, it's, the world's your oyster. You can write about anything you want. You can invent anything.
Yes.
And I might just get away totally from... I'm quite a fan of... there's everyone knows J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter series. She wrote under a pseudonym, Robert Galbraith.
Yeah.
A series, again, it was... right? And she did it under the pseudonym because she didn't want to be associated with... she wanted to be taken as a serious author with serious... And I really enjoy her books. And again, it was about a private investigator, blah, blah, blah. So, you could take it in any direction you wanted to take it. And that's appealing in some ways, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let me come over that.
Shift of topic, but hi, BJ. I'm just fascinated by your immersion into the Cantonese language and essentially being thrown in at the deep end. And one, I'm wondering what kind of challenges you experienced or strategies you used to learn the language. And secondly, do you have references to the Cantonese language in your book?
Yeah, good question. So in the police force, we did the first 8 weeks. We did elementary Cantonese. Then we did an intermediate Cantonese, which was 3 months, but it was kind of off and on. And then there was an advanced Cantonese as well. It's one of the hardest languages in the world because it's tonal. So if you get the right word, but the wrong tone, it could have maybe 6 to 8 different meanings. So when you first start to try to speak Cantonese, and I'm sure everyone's had experience of this, you're going to get the tones wrong, inevitably. And the local Chinese tend to be very dismissive of someone, even if they're trying to speak Cantonese. If you don't get the tones right, you could be talking complete nonsense and have no idea because you got the words right. So it's very hard to keep battling away at it if you don't. We had to pass exams. You don't leave police college unless you pass the elementary Cantonese exam. You have to pass it. So, we had to take it seriously. And you don't get promoted unless you pass the intermediate Cantonese exam either. So we had to basically work hard at it. But it's very easy to be discouraged when you get the, we're going with it. So if you are learning to speak it, you just keep battling away.
And was it a focus on spoken language or both spoken and written?
It's purely spoken. And this is the other thing weird with Cantonese. You've got the written Chinese, traditional Chinese, which is different to the simplified on the mainland side. And also, if you read the traditional Chinese, it's totally different. They don't talk the same way they write. Cantonese is like a slang language. So if you say we will drink tea, the written Chinese is ta mun hot cha, whereas the spoken will be order yam cha. So it's not even the same. So it's a slang language, so it's even harder to learn. Your other question about the book is, I could have put Romanized Cantonese in the book. If you've ever read the James Clavell Shogun series, a lot of the Japanese is written in Romanized Japanese, and then you have the glossary of what the words. I just thought, it's just too much work. So most of my conversation with my team is in English, apart from when we're relaxing, and I switch to Cantonese. I tell the reader I'm switching now to Cantonese, and it's still written in English. It's just an easier process, and they have to imagine I'm talking in Cantonese.
Sorry, Gary, not hogging it.
Hog away.
Two things. One, apropos the Cantonese having, if you get the wrong tone, it can be a problem. There are 3 9s in my Hong Kong ID card.
Be careful with the 9s.
Yes, I have quite often said 9 dog dicks.
Yeah.
But the real question I wanted to ask is, can you tell us anything about the plot of the book?
Yes, without revealing too much, I guess. A young schoolgirl, so he's a private detective and he gets cases that come into him. And one case comes in and it's about the father of the girl is a forensic pathologist at police headquarters in Wan Chai. And his daughter's gone missing, only overnight, so it's not sort of too drastic just yet. And he comes in with the case. He's very upset, obviously, as is his wife. And he says the police are looking into it, but I don't think they're taking it seriously because it's only been like less than 24 hours. Can you just help and look into it? So he takes the case on. And at first, the book, it goes on, they assume that she's basically gone off with a friend or with a boyfriend. And very early on in the book, and I can say this because it is early on, it's clear that she's actually been kidnapped. And then it develops from there.
Okay, I just wanted a vignette.
It's a rough, that's where it's going, yeah.
Okay.
Could you have made the story in anywhere else but Hong Kong?
Wow. The story, I personally probably not as well because it's too much of my own personal experiences. Another author could take the premise of the story and fit it into any place, I guess. I mean, it's just a story, a plot line and an ending, so that could be anywhere. But for me personally, it's so much wrapped up in my own personal experiences that I couldn't do it in Spain or something like that.
Were there any issues that you actually had to avoid?
The book is actually pretty honest, to be honest. I don't skirt around the subjects. I pretty much get into it, ups and downs of the police force. So, no, it's a fairly accurate and honest account. The bits that are true, is honestly true, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
What's the second book about? Can you give us a bit of an indication what the second book plot's going to be? Same characters?
Same characters.
Called Found, I think, isn't it?
It's called Shot, the second book. It's called Shot. Well, it's called Shot at the moment. That might change. It's based upon my work as an executive protection officer, bodyguard, and how we are very complacent about the security risks, especially in Hong Kong and Asia, where it's generally safe. I'm with a client. I'm not really thinking about someone coming around the corner and attacking my client or shooting my client. I'm more looking at facilitation of getting him from A to B, getting him to the meeting on time, or this kind of thing. No, you're not allowed to in Hong Kong. They're illegal unless you are in the police force. So basically, it's based upon the experience of that, and I'm doing an executive protection job when suddenly there is a shot and someone gets shot. So it's all my worst nightmares wrapped up in one, and it goes on from there.
Okay, okay. That's a nice little taster, I think, isn't it? All right, so I think with that we're going to wind it up there, and thank BJ very much for coming today to talk about his book. Cheers.